Hello, and welcome to the Spec Shaman Podcast, the show that explores the world of building product manufacturers, architects and engineers, sustainable design, and technology and trends. We engage in thought-provoking discussions with renowned experts, industry pioneers, and visionaries who are making a significant impact in the construction industry. Join us as we explore groundbreaking ideas, revolutionary concepts, and the latest advancements shaping the built environment. The Spec Shaman Podcast is hosted by Laura Elliott, the lead instructional designer at Ron Blank and Associates. Laura is a seasoned interviewer with a passion for uncovering the untold stories behind success. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Let's get started.
Hi, and welcome to the Spec Shaman Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Elliott, and I'm joined today by Michael O'Connor and Peter Sedgwick of Specifiers and Product Consultants Alliance. Peter is a founding member, as is Michael. Today we are discussing SPC, the start of this series, and the scope of the industries they serve. Welcome, Peter and Michael. It is great to have you here today.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
This is a unique podcast in that it's a start of a series. I'm excited to introduce the concept of your organization, how it is revolutionizing specification writing for door openings and hardware specifications, and the goals of this podcast series. So, I always like to start with the origin story. Peter, could you talk about your history in the specifications industry and how you ended up in the role you are in today?
Through a lot of trial and error. I started in the business in the early 80s coming out of architectural drafting school. I worked for a hollow metal company as a detailer, went into architectural hardware as a detailer and as an estimator. Then I moved into a national role for a while with a washroom accessory company. Ended in the 80s with a Section 10 company distributor. And in 1990, I quit everything and created three companies at the same time. And one was being the rep agency, and that's the one that lasted the longest. It's morphed a couple of times. Additional partners, including Michael, came in. And during that process, we had a lot of contract hardware manufacturers we dealt with. And the only way to get their product was one of two ways. You got shelf space, or you somehow got it in the specifications. And the specifications brought in bigger jobs and higher quality, and the products we could guide it so that we could get our products to be approved by the architectural community at large. And that's really what started it. And then eventually we morphed into, Michael and I, into two other companies, one being a completely separate specification writing company. And then the third became a national company.
So that's a lot of evolution in a career. That's very cool to see and hear those kinds of details in your process and how you developed multiple different organizations to improve specification writing. Michael, how about you? Could you tell me about your history and your current role?
Yeah, my history, Peter and I meld very well together. We mirror each other, but our backgrounds are a little different. I started for a major contract hardware manufacturer right after college that was located in central Connecticut. For people who aren't familiar with the contract hardware world, New Britain, Connecticut was at one time one of the hardware capitals of the world. Growing up in New Britain, Connecticut, you feel that working for one of these companies is a huge achievement in your life. So after college, I accepted a position with one of them and worked in a couple different roles with them as a associate rep, as a sales rep, as a commission rep, and then later worked for two of their competitors in management and executive management roles. In 2007, Peter and I, as he mentioned a moment ago, we founded our current manufacturing rep company. And that is a traditional rep company. We're independent sales agencies. We're contracted different manufacturers in the hardware world and in the washroom accessory world. The current position is what I continue to do today, mostly along with some advisory roles on our other companies. The background of these companies is interesting because they were huge. So starting, and Peter did too, we started in the central Connecticut area. That's like car manufacturers if you lived in Detroit. So everybody wanted to work for the car manufacturer. when you lived in the central Connecticut area, you knew all the hardware companies, and still today, a lot of the big hardware companies are still located here. I am also, my office is still in central Connecticut, even though we cover all of New England.
That's awesome. That is also, I think, very interesting, the way that industry informs a region in a very specific way when you grow up knowing something so well like that. Could you tell me a little bit about the inception of the organization, Michael?
I always want to say that this idea isn't new, but it's, I think, the first when it really came to fruition. I think it's more that there was a huge need in the market for independent spec writers and independent manufacturers to align. It's not that people weren't doing well. We were doing good as an independent. Many others are doing good, and the manufacturers are doing good. But in the world, there's a few big, huge organizations that, they had advantages. So this idea, which took a few years for Peter and I to facilitate, it helped not only us as spec writers, other reps become better sales agents, but independent sales managers to bridge to a larger group of like businesses. So what happens is we have a team. Not one manufacturer has to be an island anymore. They're teams. Do we share confidential information? No, of course not. But we're sharing ideas, philosophies. We share ideas on reps. We share Zoom meetings on reps. So it's an industry education thing, not only a opportunity for specification writers and independent sales reps to call on architects for the purpose of specification writing.
Well, I am all for industry education. That's a core focus of mine as well. And that's why we were so excited to make this connection and have you guys come on as guests. Peter, can you tell me a little bit about the inception of the organization from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, Michael's hit on most of the major parts, and it's a frustration with what has been occurring in the industry. In October of 2021, I was on LinkedIn very heavily expressing my opinions of where the industry is and where I felt it should correct itself. It's controlled by too few people, and most architects are unaware of how much companies are under one umbrella. And it's even worse than that. There's only one rep agency within a territory that's covering a massive amount of manufacturers. But when you look at the specification, you see 3 names written, but they're all owned by the same people. That's a problem. And it's what needed to be addressed. I was born and raised in Massachusetts. Even though most people assume it's Democrat just because of its political history, most people registered when I was a kid were independents. And that was driven to me throughout my entire life. And I believe that the independents, if they do not stand up, they will be pushed aside. And that's exactly what has occurred over the years. And what this organization is to do is to push back a little bit, softly, but to get our point across and to get our market share up and to make all the manufacturers that are involved, the reps and the spec writers, all win.
Oh, those are excellent goals. And I really appreciate your perspective on that. How does that independence and your organization help support architectural firms and specifications?
Well, if you look at a set of instructions, if you're assembling something at the house or your lawn furniture, without a proper set of instructions, that job, number one, is going to be very difficult. And number two, it's not really going to be a good job. Maybe you didn't do it correctly. Maybe there's no checks and balance system. It's the same in our world. Without a proper specification, it's the instructions of the job. Without a good, thorough, proper specification, and you don't want to use the word policing, but the policing of the written document, how do you know if you did a good job or not? My opinion of proper products is different than someone else's opinion of proper products. The specification is that guideline. A balanced independent specification not only helps many manufacturers bid a job, but it helps the owner or the architect know they're getting a good project, because conceptual project and the functional products can be two different things. Our products can look similar on a job, but with a quality range that is amazingly dramatic.
That's great. So, what markets do you serve?
Well, obviously the new construction market. We're building. Our rep firms are building material suppliers or specifiers. Retrofit projects, schools, government projects, hospitals are very prominent with us. Anything that's not a house, we could be touching. Multifamily, which Peter will talk about. Multifamily is one of the largest growing segments in our industry. And multifamily, it says multifamily, you think housing, but it's not. These are commercial properties.
Yes, absolutely. There's a big umbrella under the multifamily designator, that's for sure. So let's widen the view a little bit. What are some of the challenges of writing specifications for door openings and hardware specifications in all of those site-specific applications?
It's a lot of detailed work. It's a lot of time. And it's amazing that you can work on a spec one day and go back the next, and you start writing similar sets and you realize that they're all still different. The job that I'm currently working on is a very unique building for one of the large universities in Boston, but they're building this one up in Portland, Maine. And it happens to be a building that is to empower women in a lot of different industries. And for a lot of reasons, it has a lot of soundproofing throughout this job. It is a very difficult job. It's only got approximately 250 doors on it, but I've got 107 sets. Now, to equivalent that, there's probably 50 sets that have one door in it because it's unique in its place in the building, or the STC or the material of the door. It really makes it complicated. So this job has been a bit of a challenge. It's literally sitting behind me, and I'll go back to it after we finish this today. But it's detailed, time-consuming work to write a specification, to do it properly.
Well, and I think that there's a lot of real value to doing it properly. Life safety is an enormous component of that from the security sense, but there are all kinds of considerations. Michael, would you like to add to that?
Well, you mentioned life safety. So life safety, is a code where we have to certain specifications and rules, and we have industry like ANSI and BHMA that give us the guidelines to do this. But let's look at it. Life safety is a big segment, but let's look at the ADA. And everybody knows what an automatic door is. You go into a grocery store or the mall, the doors open by themselves. But people understand that we also have something called the low energy operator that's on a door that an able-bodied pedestrian can be using it every day, and they'll think it's a regular door automatic closer, or a closer that closes itself like hydraulically. But physically challenged or encumbered people are trained that they see that little actuator on the side of the building with the wheelchair or the progressive wheelchair, and you push it open and it opens for you automatically. But it's not an automatic door. It's a door that's intended to open automatically only when needed, not all the time. And that's a huge difference. So if an architect doesn't understand, they could be getting a piece of an apparatus on a door that's not really intended for the situation. Everybody knows the car industry, Laura. So I just make a quick reference to cars. Any car you can buy, you can sit and get you to work. But that doesn't mean that car is the proper car for you. You can't pull a tractor trailer with a little small car. So knowing the products is almost impossible for an architect to know all the products. So that relationship with a specification writer like Peter, it's going to make their job better, more cost effective, and safer to the public.
Well, you can't compromise on safety, but also that detail, that really sticks out to me because every job site is different. Every building is different. And so understanding those nuances is so valuable. And I'd like to focus a little bit on the challenges. So what challenges can be resolved by the goals of your organization?
Because we're not restricted in who we use or what product lines or what quality products, we're not sitting there where we are beating a certain drum. We can beat any drum we want at any time, and we do. And it upsets our members at times because they're trying to get their particular thing out there, but we'll use somebody else's because it's better for that particular job. And we have that discretion to do that, and we will continue to do that. And because of choice, our specifications typically are of a higher quality and a lower cost. And that helps the client.
Absolutely. And it improves the work, right?
The quality of the product going in is better.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, would you like to add to that?
Right. Yeah. I just reiterate what Peter said. The architect is the boss, and we're there to give our opinion. Do they listen to our opinion every time? Of course not. But if they want a proper job, let's say, we do a lot of work in behavioral health sciences. If there's a whole different world for commercial hardware on a patient room door in a psychiatric hospital than there is in a orthopedic hospital, knowing the difference and knowing the safety and how that hardware interacts with the safety of the patients is critical to the proper specification. If you're not intimate in those businesses, it's very difficult for you to understand the difference between a lock set for a psychiatric patient's room and a lock set for say an orthopedic or a maternity patient room. They're very different. Yes, they latch the door, but they're totally different functions, and they have different responsibilities to the opening. And that sounds like it's a living thing. We know they're not a living things, but locks and door closers and exits in washrooms, they have responsibilities to their occupants. The specification writer can make sure that those responsibilities are met in a proper and legal fashion, because legal is a lot too, because we have fire codes, we have ventilation codes, we have lighting codes that we all have to, look at and work with in that structure also.
The other thing too about the independent manufacturers, if you're looking at the innovation that's coming into the industry, it's not coming from the large guys. The smaller companies innovate it and the bigger companies buy them. And that's how it's been going for about 2 decades now. And that's where we meet some of the challenges that they can't. We've got products they don't have access to.
Oh, right, because they haven't made that mass market movement yet.
Correct. They don't want to make anything that they can't mass produce. Whereas these guys that are smaller and nimble can produce almost anything and still make money off of it.
That's an excellent point. So how do material and component quality impact the specification writing in this industry?
Well, it's all graded, as Michael was talking. So we're all required to have certain things meet certain requirements. There's ways that manufacturers try to make their products look better with lifetime warranties, 25-year warranties on certain things. And that's really a shell game, because if it's a door closer that we're talking about, a door closer should last 25 years. So the guys that have 5 years on it are just basically saying, we'll get it on the market and we don't care. The ones that are putting 25 on it know it's going to last that long, and it's never going to become a warranty issue anyways.
Yeah, that quality is integral. 100%. I see what you mean there. So,
and, we talk about, the quality. Peter mentioned door closers, and it's a strange thing, because you could spend, you mentioned what kind of vehicle you had, and, it comes with a 3-year warranty, and you're spending thousands and thousands of dollars. Someone could buy a $300 door closer, and it could be warranted almost for the life of the building.
Yeah.
In our world, that seems reasonable. In the real world, they're like, wait a minute, I paid $100 for it. Why is it warranted for more than a year? It's because it's a precise instrument. And, these things could be life safety issues, and they're warranted for a long time.
That durability really matters. I understand that, as things fail, that can become such a hazard in so many different ways. And it's awesome to see people design things that are meant to last. And it's even better that it can be integrated into a building plan and it's done by somebody that actually understands, the comparative list that you guys are working with. So I think that that's very impressive. What considerations do architects need to consider when specifying products, and why is it common for them to bring in specification writers to support that process?
Well, first and foremost, architects hate door hardware. They know it's complicated. It's amazing how that always comes up in every conversation. I was doing a Zoom with a new architect in Pennsylvania today, and the first words out of his mouth is, "I've got to get this off my desk because I hate door hardware." That's where it's. The reality is, we're a fee-based organization, and we're competing against people that do it for free. And what I tell the architect basically is, if it's free, there's a hook in there, and they're being paid for that, and you're not necessarily getting the best product for what you need for that job. So the fee that we charge for it is covered by the different manufacturers we use to lower the cost of the project for the door hardware. It's more than 3 to 4 times our fee is what their savings is. And that is a huge difference, especially on these multifamily affordable housing projects and everything else that we work in, where you need to have a certain grade product, but typically it's a very expensive product to get to that achievement. Affordable housing, as detailed by the government, is supposed to last 30 years. Yet most jobs are delivered with grade 3 lock sets that probably have a lifespan of 5 years or less. Makes no sense to put hardware like that on a job. If you go to grade 2 or even grade 1 in certain circumstances, you can extend the life of the hardware, and they're not buying new hardware 3 or 4 times over the life of the building. And that's why you hire somebody that knows what they're doing from the get-go.
That's very cost effective in so many ways.
Yep. During the process of building it and then afterwards.
Absolutely.
And Peter brings a really good point up. The difference between free and fee-based. The fee-based actually costs the owner and the architect less at the end.
Absolutely.
Just getting them to understand that.
Yeah, so that's interesting to me, because I wonder how your organization integrates resourceful, innovative approaches to specification and product consultation. How does that work?
Because we're, again, not restricted in product, we're also not restricted in who we can talk to. So if I'm working on something, just like this job that I mentioned with the sound doors, there's a manufacturer up in Canada that specializes in sound doors. And they do it in such a way, instead of having a whole bunch of gasket on the outside of the door, huge door bottoms, because of their door and frame construction, they actually only need a door bottom that you never see. No threshold is required. There's thresholds that have little steps on them, and they're a tripping hazard, and they cannot be used for ADA. But there's a lot of setups that have that threshold on their soundproof doors, whereas these guys up in Canada can do a very much cleaner install. And that's how you bring innovation into a job. It's because they have better products and we can outsource them. We can talk to almost any manufacturer. They're going to answer our questions, whether they're part of the group or not.
That sounds so fun.
You're always learning.
Yeah, you're always finding new products that answer needs. And sometimes they might be answering needs that no one's even said, hey, we need that, And
almost any given job, I put 90 minutes into research and something along the way, whether it be 1 or 2 issues. This particular job, I'm probably into 3 or 4 hours on it, but that's not typical. But you're always trying to find better stuff and finding something that's going to achieve what the owner needs.
Yeah, that's great. So when you have this enormous catalog that you get to work with from your memory, right? From all of the different companies that you're working with, what are some of the challenges of a one size fits all approach to door openings that you see across the board? And how does that affect hardware specifications in the way that you do it?
Yeah, it's not possible. Our software allows us to take an existing job, all the product categories that have been selected and all the sets, and drop it into a new job. I have tried it on several occasions. It never works out for me. I spend more time than anything else, and I dump it and I start from scratch again. And the reason you think it's going to save you time is even when I'm picking the categories, that is about an hour and a half process just to pick the products that I'm going to use in that specification. And that is in our software. And then from there, we got to create the sets by pulling the different products into each set. That's how we do it. There's no way you can do a multifamily down the street that's 360 units and say, okay, let's just drop it into this 110 unit. Well, the 360, the first floor has a massive amount of retail, fitness centers, the bike centers, could be more mixed use than that, could be a combination of office. The 110 is going to have one floor for the tenants only, and then they just go up. So there's very few sets that are required on that job, whereas that other one that's a little bit more mixed use is going to have multiple products. And if you're doing school systems, same thing. If you're a K through 12 versus higher ed versus I'm doing a school in Boston right now that is geared toward very physically challenged children. The ratio, I used to say it's 3-to-1. I think it's 2-to-1 now. Teacher to patient to student. It's and even in their pictures, you will see the classroom and the amount of attendees that are getting a student from class to class is just a very unusual ordeal. So that school has very unique requirements. You could never pull another school to do what we did on the job.
Yeah, are there adaptive technologies that you're integrating into that school?
There's a lot of things to help them move throughout the building that they're using that I would not use on anything else, any other type of building.
Like the adult changing station.
Oh, interesting.
We don't think of that when you go into a restroom, you see children's, the baby changing stations. Now there's adult or larger children up to 400-pound weight capacity. Doesn't mean the person's 400 pounds, but the attendants are leaning on it too. And these changing tables, they elevate and they decline so that they can put them on the table and bring them up to chest level. So it's easier for the attendants to work on them. 5 years ago, there weren't those. So how are they changing a student or a patient? Because if they're physically challenged, they might have problems, with going to the bathroom. So there are new products there. Touch-free products are big. I mean, we've had touch-free for a while, but they're really taking a new level of touch-free products.
Yeah, and what Michael's bringing up there's a job that we were on, the Carter or the school that we were just referring to, and that was an opportunity that we saw. So we supplied the tech data sheets for the architects, and that's what we do a lot. Sometimes I'm talking about intercom systems and certain security systems that is not normally in our section, but we can help facilitate those needs.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I have a big heart for. My mom was a special education teacher for her lifetime, and she worked with children with autism. So I definitely understand that on a personal level, having worked with her in her schools before. So that's great that you're able to integrate new technology that's going to improve the lives of so many people, not only the children that need it, but also the people that are caregiving and instructing those individuals. So that's wonderful. So when something fails, right, we mentioned a little bit ago about securing schools and in the role that hardware plays in that. What are some of the consequences of product failures if something is written wrong into the specification?
It creates the atmosphere for a lawsuit to occur.
Mm-hmm.
We had an incident, I don't know, probably a decade ago that we were not on. Somebody supplied a product that we represented. It was a glass door, and it failed and it shattered
Mm.
and it injured somebody. So when you get things like that where the hardware has not been properly specified out for the weight of the door, again, I hate to go back to this job, but since it's fresh in my mind, when you're dealing with sound doors, you're dealing with a very heavy door. So a typical steel door weighs about 110 pounds. When you move into 3'9" or 3 foot wide, 9 foot high tall doors that are soundproof, you're getting into the range of 300 and 350 pounds. So if you're not using the correct pivots to carry that weight and that load, you're going to have issues. And we've got to watch that. We've got to watch the ADA. It amazes me that the country of Canada has laws that operators must be everywhere for ADA. If you walk into any retail store, the front door has an operator on that. That's not code in the United States. We wait until you're in the building and then we have one for the restroom for you. Well, how do you get there in the first place? It's usually a struggle. You've got a ramp. Yes, hopefully it has an operator on the outside or it's an automatic door. But, it's things like that that affect people's daily lives. I was injured a few years ago with bad knees. It was very difficult for me to open up doors. Door closers are horrendously bad at meeting the ADA requirement, 8.5 pounds pressure to open on the exterior and 5.5 on the interior. And we, as a group, have always believed in a certain technology in a door closer that makes it much smoother and the ability to operate those doors, which isn't readily available in the United States or wasn't when we started. But we incorporate that particular product in almost every one of our specifications somewhere. And that's why it's easier for people to walk through it, whether they're physically challenged or they're totally fine to walk through. It serves both people at the same time without the cost of a low energy operator.
I see. That makes a lot of sense.
In hardware, as Peter was saying, if you're physically challenged or normal pedestrian traffic, most hardware is developed to be operated by normal pedestrian traffic, not by physically challenged people or by temporarily challenged people. So you have like Peter said, he had knees, he was temporarily challenged. Or children, or senior citizens. They are also encumbered individuals that may have trouble with hardware. So you have to look at the total picture and without a skilled consultant asking, well, what is your pedestrian travel in this building? Because it could be totally different, each building. I mean, there could be always a blend of travel, but sometimes the pedestrian travel is different. And that's from the mats when you first walk in the door, because they could be dangerous. The thresholds climbing over the door, the hardware that's on the door, what's in the bathrooms. There's hundreds of questions that need to be asked. Even colors, because colors will give, on the floor or on the walls, give directional information. How many times you go to a hospital and they say, you go up to the third floor and follow the purple hallway. The colors are there for directional, not just for aesthetic value.
So how does security play a role in how you determine the best product for the project?
That's a bunch of people talking together. That is not one person deciding what's going to happen in any particular building. You have security consultants, you have the architect's opinion, you've got the owner's opinion, you've got our opinion as the hardware specifiers, and it all comes down to the needs of that building. There are products that are on the market now, especially on lockdown for schools. You don't want to harden a school to the point where it's impossible to get in and out of a school. Schools were meant for the community to use them. And that still should not go away just because of what's currently happening. There are products that can now be used in schools on the classrooms so people know that there is somebody in there in a locked door or an unlocked door, there's indicators that the police can see from the edge of the lock before they get to the door that the door is locked or unlocked. That's very key to a police officer walking down a corridor because his most deadly area is in front of a door. You can shoot through doors.
Absolutely.
So for an officer to know that that door is locked before he even gets there and has to put his hand on the lever to determine if it's locked, he can already see that it's locked. Those are the small little things we can do. We can still harden up the front of the school as we should and the backside, so there's no easy answer. But there is no easy answer to any of the stuff we do. But it's a work of a bunch of people, and they're probably some of the funniest conversations because security people speak a totally different language than door hardware people do. And it takes a while for us to come together and figure it out, but we get through them. I like the security meetings. They're interesting. They're always different.
I'm sure. I would love to come to one. I think security is a really fascinating area that is definitely impacting the built environment in so many profound ways. And you are always, especially when you're talking about a community space like a school, you're trying to secure it, but also make it accessible at the same time. And that is, a nexus of an issue for sure. And it's good to know that there are people like yourself that are working on making that possible, so that communities aren't disrupted by the new security concerns that have arisen in our society. Are there any notable case studies that come to mind in the field in which you work?
We've done some interesting jobs. We have an architect in Cambridge that has brought us to Saudi Arabia to work on housing jobs, which doesn't sound like a big deal, except when you figure out that we had over 100,000 doors that we had to do on 29 buildings in townhouses of 240 variety, which made it quite interesting. And it was a job that got done. It took a while. And that same firm did a job in Iceland where we did an addition hotel. And it's really funny to go from knowing what a 3070 door looks like to 1330 millimeters by 3800 millimeters is roughly a 3070 door. So I had all kinds of cheat sheets when I was working over there to convert it all over. And when we talk about walls being 4 7/8 inch, they're like, what? What's a fraction? And you break it down and you work through it. And the same time we were doing the Edition Hotel, we were doing the old Taj Hotel in Boston. And we had 2 architects, 2 construction firms, and 2 suppliers on that job we had to deal with, and an interior designer. And none of them could agree on anything until the last minute, but we got through it. But there's a lot of jobs that make an impact. I do think the school with the children in Boston with the physically challenges was really one of the most interesting jobs we've done in a long time.
Yeah, that's definitely very striking. Michael, are there any that stick out to you?
Well, it's very interesting for architects. They can actually go onto the manufacturer's websites, and you mentioned case studies, and that's a big thing for manufacturers now. They put their case study highlights. Yes, it shows a pretty building, but a lot of times they'll come in and show more structure, and even sometimes interview the architect or the interior designer on little bits and pieces, what they were thinking about this building. In our world, most people they'll drive down the road and go, oh, it's pretty, or, that's sort of vanilla. And it's not always the structure. It's really the interiors of the building that are unique, or not unique. And sometimes the interesting cases, like I mentioned, we spend a lot of time in hospitals. Mm-hmm. Hospitals got away from real wood in the hospital. They go to a composite that's cleaner, not bacteria growth. But people like real wood. So their lobbies are getting really fancy. And even though I don't sell this stuff or we don't specify this stuff, but you go into a hospital like in Connecticut, the Hartford Hospital Bone and Joint Center. they got these beautiful wood desks and structures when you walk in the building, and it's just a comforting feeling with the warm and nice textures. So their case studies are individual. Most of the people in my world are technical people. You know, we want to make sure it's form and function. But I think the interesting case study are the adaptability of the architects and interior designers to make these commercial, traditionally stale, bland buildings warm and inviting.
Yeah, when we're doing CEUs or lunch and learns, the best impact for the architect is when we bring up a case study. When we take something that we got up on a screen and we're talking about it, but we bring it into the real life of something we've seen or something we've done, that brings more interest to the architects that are in the room by far.
Yeah, there's 2 points that really struck out to me, and that's I am like in love with this movement in medical spaces where they're incorporating warmth and like healing in the aesthetic appeal of those spaces, because I think that goes such a long way to the psychology and emotional health involved in healing spaces, right? I remember growing up, and I'm sure you do too, like where it was very sterile and white
Right.
and glaring
It's
and
scary.
yeah, like really intimidating.
Yeah.
So it's really lovely that design professionals, I think, are accessing this trend of incorporating warmth and like a spa-like feel to places where we have to get our medical care.
But there's a challenge with that, because some of these warm, cool things that you would want on the wall also allow bacteria growth. So you can't have them in a hospital. So there are companies out there who have figured out how to incorporate, say, wall protection, protecting the wall, but with art in it. Really cool art, especially in pediatrics things, that still provides safety and cleanliness, but also warmth. Colors are huge. 20 years ago, our colors were stainless steel, polished chrome, satin chrome. Once in a while, you get some dark finishes in there. And that was pretty much it. If you knew 10 finishes, you were pretty good in our business. You know, now we have hundreds, textures, finishes, wood grains. It's just became more desirable. And your expansive knowledge had to really increase. And that goes back to the independence. Sometimes as an independent salesperson or an independent agent, you have a bunch of different manufacturers that you represent that you could bring together and meld together for a package for a hospital or a school or an office building, and tie all these different manufacturers in and offer a complete package. That's a service to an architect, because an architect likes to deal with less people. Everybody likes to deal with less people.
Right.
Because our lives are busy. Our jobs are busy.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in everybody's daily lives to accomplish things. So anytime we can streamline a collaborative process, that's always an enormous advantage. It must be interesting to go places with the both of you, because I'm sure there's
You
not
might want to ask our wives that.
I'm sure there's not a space that you walk into that you're not assessing some of those details in a really profound way, and it might inform how you feel about where you are. So,
And when the kids were little, they would say, "Dad, is that your door closer?" Sure.
yeah, that's mine. That's
You
mine.
know, you're a hero in a door closer world or a hardware world.
That's right. So what advice would you give a young architect who is faced with securing and locking a building to meet a client's needs?
Hire a consultant, save yourself some pain. It's going to happen, but I would tell them to have that consultant on board, work with them throughout the entire project, learn from them, and understand why we use certain products, why we use certain hinges, why we're concerned about pressure in the stairwell, the exterior of the building being secure, why we use certain type products and grades, and learn all of that. You're not going to learn it overnight. We didn't learn it overnight. There's classes for it, but even the classes, what are you going to remember from a 1 week class? Nothing. 5% is the average that somebody learns. If you're not estimating or detailing on a regular basis, you can't learn door hardware. You got to be engaged on a daily basis.
You have to speak the language.
And
Yeah,
also,
difficult.
yeah. And what Peter said, build it with the spec writer, but also build it with the manufacturer's product consultant. Because they know their products, or they should, and you'll know quickly if they know their products. Because there are things that they'll know, especially the details, the texture. I mean, for instance, you can work on a job and someone really likes this product. As as we're saying as a product consultant, this product's good, but let me tell you, traditionally it's a 20-week lead item. Is that going to be a problem? That helps the spec writer if the owner already knew that, because they may not have 20 weeks.
Right.
So the product consultant is a big key to their success also.
Yeah, and the best sales reps are the ones that are talking as if they're coming from the authority of being a product consultant, not as a salesperson. They're going to win more architects over than going in there and trying to beat them into a product that isn't necessarily going to be the one they need for that job.
Right. And think about
Pick your consultants well.
As a product consultant, architects aren't my customer. They don't write me purchase orders.
Right.
So what do I have to offer them as the most value? Education.
Knowledge.
And that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for the glitz. They're looking for the education.
No, and that's, go ahead.
And a seasoned salesperson or a seasoned product consultant, they know a lot of things because they've seen failures out there. And those failures helped us make decisions on not only what we should rep, but what we should promote. And the same with the specification writer. When they go to a specification writer and Peter says it can't be canned. Well, it can't be, because if situations change, the products change, the material changes, and your outcome is going to be different. So it's each job may not look unique, but they are unique.
Yeah, the only jobs you can duplicate are a chain of hotel that are built the same way each time. That's the only job that you can duplicate, and hope that there's no changes in codes within state to state, because then you're going to be changing that spec again.
Yeah, I just did a podcast with somebody that worked in failures for quite some time, and then ended up creating patented designs to improve the places where he found failure. So I think that's a really good note to hit on, because I think that those failures really teach us how to improve what we design and what we specify, and the consultation that we give across the board. And integrity has to be at the heart of it, right? It can't be that you're sitting there trying to push your product and that's all you ever do, because that's all you'll ever be known for. Really, being a consultant means that you're not necessarily married to your brand first, right? But to the industry at large, and improving it always. So
yeah, we flipped 15 years ago from sales into product consultants, and that's where the name from everything that we do ever since has been there.
yeah,
But as Peter and I being a little more seasoned in the industry too, we have an advantage that we don't have to represent products that aren't of high quality.
yeah, that's quite the blessing, right?
It is. It's really a blessing. If you're representing really quality companies and quality manufacturers who produce quality products, your job's a little easier.
Yeah, that makes a
And
difference.
same with a specification writer. If the specification writer could choose which manufacturer they put in the specification, their life's a little easier, because they know that a lot of the garbage that happens on a job isn't going to come back to them.
Right. Right. Well, so how has the industry changed from your perspective over the last 50 years? What are the biggest things that strike you?
It's the loss of the small manufacturers being gobbled up by the larger manufacturers. So in the United States, you've got three major players and another smaller one, and they control way too much. And the cost of a product after the fact being ordered through distribution is substantially higher, because they know it's their building and that they've got the control of that building and the pricing of it. It's not fair to the client. It's not fair to the taxpayers that have universities that are totally loaded up with any given manufacturer. The issue, of course, is when you've got 300,000 doors on campus and you don't have a standard, how do you standardize it other than going with one manufacturer? There is ways around that. And there's ways to beat that, but they won't tell you that. We'll tell you that because we don't care about their key system. We care about the product being delivered at the lowest cost for the highest quality product. And that's what we bring. I'm doing a walkthrough every Friday of this month to do 2 campuses that are being redone. And there's roughly 700 doors that we're going to be looking at. And we're going to have to determine what's going on each door. The major reasons it's being done is security of the building, ADA requirements, and a legacy key system that is costing them too much to maintain. And that came up very adamantly during the meetings with the owner and the purchasing department, the facility people. You know, when you start paying $15 for a key and $110 for a core,
Right.
that's a problem,
Right.
you know.
So how does having a large catalog of products and a great command of how they can be applied help in a project like that?
Because we can use the correct product without going back to the old standby, whatever it may be. And if we need a custom product, we can get it from some of these manufacturers. I had an issue several months ago that nobody had a product that I needed. So I went to a California manufacturer that I know the owners really well. I explained the situation and they said they could build it, and they did. And it was a narrow style aluminum door lock, but it had to have what's called latch retraction, whereas when you set it off, the lock or the latch retracts so you can open up the door. It unlocks and you can walk through. And it's in a very, very narrow style on an aluminum door. Nobody had one of those. And they have now made one, and it works beautiful, and it achieved what we needed on that job. You're not going to get that anywhere else. You know, you're not going to get it from the big guys. It just, they like to sell A, and the next day they want to sell A, and the next day they want
all
we don't
A's.
care. A through Z. Let's go. Be creative. We did a job up at UMass recently where I suggested while we were doing it that we should change the hinges on the job because of the design of the building so that you could not see any of the hinges. So usually you see the butt here of the hinge sitting out, and you got 3 or 4 of them depending on the height of the door. You don't see any of these. And the next job that went out after we did this one had the same hinges on it because the owner saw it and decided that they should do that on the next one. And they are now doing that with another architect, another spec writer, but it's going to be the same type of hinge.
That's great. I bet that's beautiful. You know,
the only time you see the hinge is when you open up the door.
That's great. So we talked a little bit about life safety and incorrect specification. What are some of the greatest risks that can occur if it's not done correctly?
It's the failure of the opening, and it could be a minor part of the door. Wrong hinge selection binds doors up. If you don't have the power of the correct door closer, it's in a stairwell and the door slams, or it's in a wind tunnel and it slams and a little kid's hand is in the opening at the time, that's a problem.
Right.
And those are all the things that we have to look at. We were blessed earlier in our careers to look with a manufacturer that had great products. And if we couldn't do it with one door closer, we actually could stack 2 closers on top of each other on a door that could take the wind. We had a problem in Boston on the seaport. The seaport in Boston is pretty windy, and you could have on a nice sunny day a 60-mile-per-hour wind come through there. You open up one of those back doors, and it would just grab that door and pull it against the wall. Damage the door, damage the wall. We have to do the opening. They'd be doing cost all the time. You put 2 closers on it. Doesn't meet ADA, but they didn't need ADA at these locations. So it was back doors that typically somebody physically challenged shouldn't have been in those areas anyways. Or at least not unattended.
Right. Right. Michael, how about you?
I think Peter said it very good. You never want to hurt anybody.
Right.
I mean, fire laws, they have the fire laws and the building burns down and, most people are out, hopefully. And that's always the one we think of. Oh, the building burned down. Did they get out okay? Did the smoke system work? The sprinklers work? But the reality is you don't want to hurt anybody. You don't want a door to hit anybody. You don't want a washroom soap dispenser to fall off, when you're using it. You don't want hand dryers to, catch on fire. You don't want to hurt anybody. And you think of these as just pieces of, things attached to a wall or to a door, but they're mechanical. Little kids can slam their fingers in doors. You don't want that to happen. So a lot of the specifications, sure, the tragedy things, yeah, we all know, but there's the little things too. The little things in projects we can do to make sure that pedestrian traffic is safe.
Mm-hmm.
It's a responsibility. And guess what? At the end of the day, the architect's getting blamed for it. We don't want them to get blamed for it.
Right.
We want to make sure they do a good job and we do a good job. And, we're also, we're watchdogs to our manufacturers. Sometimes they'll send a product out, you'll be on a job for a service job or an inspection, and you go back to them and say, hey, look, your product's terrible. Because it's not what the industry needs. And they listen to you because, they have less and less personnel these days too. So they're looking for your opinions as long as you can back it up with factual information. Cell phones have helped too because we can FaceTime people. Look at the way your door opens and closes on FaceTime.
Yeah.
It's huge. Walking through a building with an engineering staff at a manufacturer using FaceTime.
Yeah.
Your answers are immediate.
Yeah.
And and there's no interpretation. It used to be, well, you'd have a problem, the manufacturer, well, we've never seen that before. Well, of course you have. But that's a good answer. And you'd have people out on the job that weren't qualified to make these decisions anyway, both reps or end users, facility people, architects. So technology's helped us a lot.
Mm.
It's changed our world a lot. And I think people are safer because of it. Now, the manufacturer is responsible for fire codes, burning products, making sure that the pull forces are right. We don't have any control in that because we don't manufacture their products. We cannot specify their products if they don't match it. But, and there's some things like that. Peter talked about the pull force of the door opening force. Those are made in a laboratory when they figure it out. In real world situations, it doesn't always work that way. If you're in a vestibule situation, like say in Phoenix Airport, where your outside door is 100 degrees, but because the vestibule door and the sun beating on the glass, it's 140 degrees. A hydraulic door closer could work differently at 100 than it can at 140. So you have to know that information when you're specifying.
Yeah, that's a huge consideration.
You just want a smooth transition. Our best thing is nobody notices our stuff. The pretty stuff we want to notice, but the functional stuff, you don't want them to notice it. You just want them to have a smooth experience.
And even if you have the correct fire rated device or something to that effect, there's exit devices that we are not fond of ever using, and they're crossbars. And we had a fire in Rhode Island, probably 15, maybe even 20 years ago, where 230 people died inside a nightclub because the doors can be chained down in this particular X device. They are pairs of doors next to each other. They'll change the doors, chain the doors. You can't exit. And that's what killed those people that day. They stacked up against the doors because they were chained down by management. And that's why those gentlemen are spending 25 years in prison. So we are very hesitant to put products that are still out there. You can still get those crossbars, but we won't put them on projects unless it's a single door with nothing else near it, where the facility guy will chain it down, because they'll chain it off a pole and put it around to keep it locked, because they're easy to manipulate from the outside. That's part of the problem. So you can get inside it, and that's why they chain them down. But it's deadly.
Well, that's terrible. That's terrible.
Yeah, but normal people will go to a basketball game and they'll see a bank of doors and a few of them are chained and they don't think anything about it. Oh, that's for security.
I always think that's not where we're supposed to go. That's where all the basketballs are. We can't take them.
And it could be an egress, a means of egress out of that building.
Right. Those are really vital considerations to make sure that you're not preventing a pathway of escape. 100%. Are those some of the most important lessons that you've learned in your career in this field, or are there any others that stand out to you both?
You gotta know your products. See, it's a little easier, say, for an independent rep who just covers New England. I have to know New England rules. But a specification writer who does things all over the country, they have to know all over the country or all over the world. So it's different. I think the most important lesson is basic. Never guess. I mean, you get in trouble if you guess. I've been in rooms with people, in meetings, keying meetings, product meetings. There's no way this information is real. They're just guessing it. It comes back. You have to be able to stand behind your word. And sometimes, you learn it a little as you get a little more seasoned. The other thing is to use technology. Okay, technology is great. Most places have Wi-Fi, so you can look on manufacturers' websites right at the job site. As I mentioned before, there's FaceTimes where you can go right to engineering. Or Peter and I, he has different expertise than I do. So we talk constantly. What do you think about this? And with an alliance, that gives an avenue for specification writers and reps and manufacturers all over the country to have sounding boards. We have Zoom meetings that are sounding boards. Hey, has anybody ever come into contact with this? Anybody know this situation? It really helps you. We're using their experience, their education. They're using ours.
Those authentic collaborative moments that have just been made possible in this technological advancement of a era that we're in, I think is just really revolutionizing everything. COVID
really helped. It did. I built a huge network relationship with interior designers during COVID. Always, if you're in an architect's office, interior design, you always talk to them. But during COVID, they weren't in their offices.
Right.
So they're reaching out to me via phone or email for expertise. And I built a relationship with these people. And if you think about it in the interior design world, because they're becoming more and more popular, a lot of them are really young, and I'm not. But it became a very nice working relationship. And that's continued even, because they're still in hybrid situations. They're not all back in their offices. It's hard to ask your boss the same question 4 times in a month. But you can ask a consultant the same question because you have no effect on their career. So we became a resource for them.
Yeah, the other day we did a Zoom where we had 5 reps talk as peer-to-peer, and they gave case studies and real things that we were doing to help them in their territories, and they were expressing it to the other reps. That was a pretty powerful message to have 5 of them in a row with a very consistent message, even though we didn't tell them what to talk about. They all said key words all the same.
So is that dispelling some of the myths about product consultants and specification writers, this really amazing, authentic collaboration that's happening?
Yeah, well, a lot of people think a bunch of things. And one of them is that we're paid by the manufacturers to write specifications. We are not. There are independents out there that do take a check from the manufacturers and from the architects. We only take the check from the architect and or his client, depending on how the structure of the contract is. So we only work for them, and there's no other payment sent to us. And that's a big one. Everybody always thinks you're making money on the side. And in this case, we can be pure and say, no, we are not. And prove it.
So regarding your organization, what are some of the biggest challenges that you're facing right now in getting the word out about the value of what you do and the unbiased approach to product consultation?
It's just that we're unbiased, and we've got to get the architects to understand that we're different than what they've dealt with. Most of them have dealt with one of the free specification writers at least several times in their careers, if they've been active in the architectural community, and they get a certain feel and they get a certain vibe, and they don't provide the services that we do. something as simple as submittal review, which is critical to an architect. And when he's at the most vulnerability, because he doesn't know what A product looks like versus B product, and he doesn't know which details to look at to prove his case one way or the other. We had a situation in the Carolinas where we were asked, and we were paid to do it by the architect, to compare a particular brand against a submitted product, neither of which were involved in a specification we were not involved in. And we went line by line and proved each product, what they were not, all the way down. And we did 10 or 12 of the basic products that are on a job. And at the end of it, an architect could read what we had and had an understanding of what the differences were, and went back to his client and said, yes, approve this other manufacturer. It is acceptable, because we became a third party to that.
That's amazing.
But our biggest problem is getting name recognition out there.
So just raising the awareness.
Yeah, I'm very busy on LinkedIn, very direct sales approach to get people to understand. We have 2 people on staff that send out emails throughout the country of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and we want to work with them on their projects. So it's written to a person, it's not written to a firm. Hopefully it's the right person, but like any of the reporting services, they're not always accurate. And we send the same message time after time. And we are now starting to get the work come in that we need to see to satisfy everybody that's in this group.
So is that one of the initiatives behind this podcast series that you're launching? And is the primary goal of it to develop content that allows people to understand what it is that you're doing and how it's impacting the built environment?
Yes. And the stories of these manufacturers have never been told. No one knows about them. They don't understand that almost every company that we work with is owned by a family of one kind or another. There is very few, if any, corporations, probably one in there, but everything goes back to one person or 2 persons owning these companies. And when you hear their struggles of where they came from and how they achieved what they have, and this is a lot of people that you would not expect to have been as successful in the door hardware industry as they are. They don't look like us. They come from somewhere else, whether it be Taiwan, China, other nations that I just can't think of offhand, but they have a varied background. And I think that's what makes them better. And I think that's why we have innovation in our group that the other ones do not. And I'll always go back to that, because I can count on the group to solve my problems when I can't figure it out.
Yeah, that's an integral piece to success, right?
And most hardware specifiers are arrogant, and they think they're the best. Just ask them, they'll tell you. We don't think
Peter,
that.
are you arrogant? Do you think you're the best?
No. But I got a good team behind me.
But
just
my
can't see
team
'em.
is. That's good. That's good. So what do you hope to offer by creating a podcast series? Do you want to express that diversity and really highlight those manufacturers?
Absolutely. I want them to know that there is a sum of people that they've never touched before that can solve their hardest hardware issues. And they can give you the specification that's fair and open and unbiased.
And it gives them an opportunity. It gives them an opportunity also to widen their visibility.
Right.
It's like Peter said, these are families. But back in the early 1800s, the big hardware manufacturers were families too.
Yep.
That's right.
And we've got to give them a lot of credit for bringing these products to our world. And it's in the early 1800s, a lot of them came from Europe, and they were small tool and die shops that just became bigger and saw needs and saw changes. And I worked for both huge companies and smaller companies. They both have their advantages. What Peter said, the smaller companies, he'll call the owner and the guy will say, yeah, I'll try that. Let's go see if I can make it. And he goes in his shop for a week to see if he can do it. I don't know if
Or
you get that.
he comes out and he's banging on his lock saying how
Yep.
good it, smashing it
With a hammer.
We got to do a video case study on that alone.
We did. We did. There's a video on it. It's pretty cool.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, I'm really excited to partner with you to launch this podcast series that focuses on these really unique areas that haven't been seen before and give a voice to an area that I think is definitely deserving of it. So thank you for partnering with me on that.
Thank you.
We're really excited about it. So when you look at the future, right, the goals of your organization, of this podcast, for your members and your team and yourselves individually, what do you want to achieve?
I want to see 5% of the U.S. specifications for door hardware be written under our organization. And if that is achieved, our manufacturers will not be able to handle all those orders, and we'll have to enlarge our membership to accommodate everything that will happen. That is the goal. That is what I have in my mind of what we want to get to. And it's that 5%. I've said it for a while. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of specifications.
And a lot of our members aren't spec writers, so they're independent sales agents. And one of the things that we've been enjoying, or I've been enjoying, is getting them out of their comfort zone and making them think long term. Peter and I are very long term thought process. A lot of reps are not. They're short term, 30, 60, 90 days, where we're thinking years. They're thinking 30, 60, 90 days. We're trying to get people out of their comfort zone to realize that if they get out of their comfort zone, do some of the suffering, not do some of the suffering that we had to do, learn from what we did, and they could become more successful.
Yeah. And we've taken off their plate one of the biggest things to do, and that's the grind work of contacting architects on a regular basis for them. So they're mentioned on all the emails that go out. In fact, the call this morning was the architect didn't respond to us. He responded to one of the reps that he saw on the list. And he called them and they got us in contact, and we did a Zoom early today. And that's the synergies of working together. But we'll take the heavy lifting. We'll get them over the finish line, if you will, and we'll continue to grow this group. We're also planning on expanding on our offering. So anything that's in Section 8 is where we're going. I want to fill every space that's in there. And when you look at a specification for Section 8 by the new numbers, there's about 50 categories. Now, you could probably only have 10 or 12 manufacturers that can fill those categories, but there is a tremendous amount. And then longer term, we're going to go also after Section 10, where we have a very rich history in that as well.
Those are great goals. I'm such an appreciator of big goals like that, So I definitely think that's remarkable, and I am excited to see you achieve them and the journey that you're going to go through. Michael, did you want to add anything?
Well, the big goal you mentioned, Laura, big goals. They are big goals, but they're achievable goals. They're not pie in the sky. It's definitely a plan and a plan achievement. And if we think about this working correctly, people will still be talking about this in 20 years. Not Peter and I, but other people will. You probably will be, but they'll talk about it, and it could change the industry for the better.
No, that vision is wonderful. I love it. And I think that it's definitely, like you said, achievable. In listening to you both today, I've definitely seen or understood that there's a lot that can be done in a career, right? And what you guys are putting together is definitely going to have a legacy behind it. And one of the primary goals of this podcast is to build a catalog of wisdom for the industries that we serve. That is an authentic goal here. So what is one piece of industry wisdom that you would like to share with our audience in closing? Michael, I'd like to start with you.
Yes, that there's options. I mean, there really are. there shouldn't be 3 or 4 options in the world. There could be options available that best service your needs. It's hard to find the information on those options, but with something like ours, we're giving you opportunities not only for us to explain the options, but for you to explore on your own as an architect or a manufacturer or a sales rep, options to satisfy your clientele base. You're giving them a real service. We're not actually selling them a product. We're selling them a service that builds our relationship for the long term. And it's not just Peter's and my relationship, it's the relationship of our organization, the relationship of our manufacturers. I think it's gonna add value. I don't want to say it's gonna add value like the internet, because the internet gave us immediate amounts of information, but these are filtered information where we've taken a lot of the fluff out, and we're giving them opportunities to build better buildings.
Content filterers. That's important. That's such an important thing right now because there is so much to sift through. Peter, how about you?
I guess the way I look at this is in my career, when I've taken the biggest chances, I've had not necessarily financial success from it, but I always had a lot of personal growth from it. And I guess if I'm talking to this audience of architects and so forth, is take a chance with this organization, break away from what you've done in the past, and you may find that your experience is not as difficult and as challenging as you have experienced, because we are definitely different and we do go to market completely different than those other people do. And we are a fee service, so we will be there when you need us. It's a one charge fee. We never change our fee. No matter what happens on the job, we go over, we go over, and that's the way it is. We're very honest, straightforward, black and white people. We don't like gray. You put us in gray and we're very uncomfortable.
I understand that. So this is going to conclude our educational portion of this podcast, and we're going to open it up for a post AIA presentation question session. Peter, I'd like to start with you. How do design professionals learn more about your organization?
They can check out our website, spcalliance.org. It is a password driven, so they will be restricted in how far they can go. They also can call us at 508-252-6712, or go on the website and get our email address at info@spcalliance.org. And they can contact us in any of those ways, or get me on LinkedIn. I'm always out there trolling sometime during the day.
Could you help us understand the rate structure for the services that you offer?
It's job by job. And we just look at the job, and it's really what we're looking at the end of the day is how many sets we got to create. And if we can tell, you can tell quickly, and we've had enough experience with all our jobs that we take a pass. We need floor plans. If there's a door schedule, great. If they're too early in the stages, that's fine. We can do it with the floor plan.
Michael, are you accepting new independent manufacturers at this time?
Accepting as approved, yes. There's a procedure they have to go through, and it's not just becoming a member. If they become a member, they have work to do also. They have to interact with their sales forces to bring the information we bring to them to make sure it's just not sitting in somebody's email box. But we're willing to talk, and as Peter said, we're expanding into Division 8, and then we'll expand to the Division 10. Which, even though they're two different divisions within the specification, a lot of the same customers, architects work on the same products. So they'll definitely homogenize together. I can't say it's going to be unlimited. I don't know if it could be unlimited. It would become maybe too crowded to say anybody can join. Mm-hmm. But the other thing too is we're a small industry. There's not that many of us. And there's not many manufacturers. So Peter, were we saying how many manufacturers could there possibly be? A couple hundred?
Yeah, maximum.
That's not a lot.
Right.
And then out of the couple hundred, there's some of them we wouldn't want to talk to. Just
And some
because,
of our competitors own 200 companies.
yeah. And it's, something, and the nice thing, Laura, is this the ultimate answer to everybody's needs? No, but it's an
Right.
answer to a lot of people's needs. And that's all we need. Peter said we'll take, what, 5%. If we can satisfy somebody's, if we can take an architect and lessen his problems on a job, we're in forever.
I understand. That's a good share.
Yeah. And the other thing, we want to get people out of their, especially independent sales reps. We want to get them out of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
To think about new things, because this is different than they had to do in the past.
So how do they get connected with SPC, the same pathway that Peter was discussing?
Well, if the manufacturer is a member of the SPC, all of their sales reps are rep members automatically. So they have access to the website. We feed them information on job leads, new construction projects constantly. So they're getting lots of information from us. And what that does is that gives them an opportunity to call an architect in their territory saying, hey, we've been aware of this job that you're on. Our products are specified. Can I make an appointment and come and present them to you? Is there any questions you have on them? They're the local authority.
Yeah, and we're doing Zooms. We've discontinued for a short period, but we'll be bringing it back, where two manufacturers talk for 30 minutes on a Zoom about either their product or about themselves, which way they choose to go. And it gets the force to understand that there's other opportunities out there with all these other manufacturers, because of the unique position that we have put ourselves in between a conduit between the manufacturers, the spec writers, and the reps. We know certain things that normally we would not know. And because of that, we can actually help rep agencies get additional lines that are qualified, decent lines for them to represent, because the manufacturers coming to us saying, who should we hire in this territory? Who should we talk to over here? And we know which ones are motivated and which ones do whatever. And we support all those guys. And even the guys that are struggling. There's going to be some changes in the industry shortly that'll be bringing them up as well. I can't discuss it because it's a different project, but there are things happening that are going to completely change the game for all these guys that are struggling right now to compete against gorillas.
And the other thing too is, early in my career, I worked for a single line manufacturer as a sales rep, not independent, but a commission sales rep. So you would go to an architect and do a great presentation, and then they say, "Hey, that's wonderful. Can you write the spec for me?" Well, I wasn't a spec writer, so I'm like, no. But now the reps have an organization. When the architect says, "That's great. Can you write the spec?" Well, I don't write specs, but we have a team of experts who write the specs. So it's really helped.
It really helps to wrap those services together.
Yeah, the same Zoom we were on this morning, the rep wanted to talk to me after we let the architect go off the call. And that's exactly what he was talking to me about, is how do we get better? What can I do? How do I become a spec writer? Is there a process for learning? And there is. We've got two right now that are in training, if you will, and he would be a third, because we can't rely on the old guard to help us, because they're entrenched in what they do and they don't want to do change either, even though they're independents. It doesn't,
or they're busy,
or they're too busy.
Yeah. Well, those are wonderful services to incorporate as well. Like, I didn't know that you were doing apprenticeships as well. So that's great.
Not only that, but actually, Peter, I think it's next month, he's going to work with another independent rep firm to show them how to make architect calls.
Right.
Yeah.
To say, hey, look, we're going to spend a day of our time to show you how we make architect calls.
Yeah. No, that's, we see that a lot too. Like at RBA, we definitely are working a lot of those different areas as well and I think in a different way, but supporting that communication bridge, right? I think that that's one of the biggest pieces, is that, for a long time, I think people were in different like areas and they weren't interconnecting. And now I'm seeing such an advancement in breaking down some of those barriers through the tools that we have with technology and our forward way of thinking about things. Well, if we're all in these corners, let's break down the walls so we won't be anymore. And I think that that's really valuable. So that's good to hear.
Like I told one of our manufacturers, it's one brick at a time until we build that wall.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it has been such a pleasure to speak with you both today, and I am excited to close out the first podcast in this series and look forward to the next episode where we get to meet your manufacturer and learn the story of their creation. So I want to thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Spec Shaman Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to our show and leave us a review. The Spec Shaman Podcast is produced by Laura Elliott and Brad Blank. A huge thank you to our guests who made this show possible. Building product manufacturers who want to increase their specification opportunities, please visit specshaman.com or ronblank.com. Thanks all for this episode, folks. See you next time.